more than 150 years now since the great wagon trains headed west out of Missouri. There were no roads and few trails, and no wagon had ever been driven across this great American desert.
They had to be capable of supporting themselves for a while before they could become productive.
What if the story of the Oregon Trail is not exactly what we've always thought we knew? What if it was more than just a path carved by travelers? Instead, it was a journey full of untold struggles, hidden strength, and silent heroes. For years, we've pictured covered wagons rolling smoothly across open land, but the real story is far more unsettling than you might imagine. So, who were the people behind this historic migration? And why does their journey still matter today? Stay with us, because what we're about to reveal could change everything you thought you knew about the Oregon Trail. The Wagon Trail we thought we knew. For a long time, many people have imagined the Oregon Trail as a slow-moving line of wooden wagons crossing wide, open fields. We picture strong oxen pulling these wagons under bright, warm sunlight. Movies and old drawings often show it like a fun family road trip. In our minds, parents sit calmly inside the wagon while kids lean out, excitedly pointing at the beautiful, endless open land stretching ahead. However, as comforting as that picture in our minds might be, it leaves out what the journey was really like. The truth is, wagons were not the cozy shelters we often think they were. In fact, they were quite the opposite. Inside those wooden frames, the space was tight, dark, and always shaking. Most wagons were only about 4 feet wide and 10 feet long, about the size of a small bedroom. There was no padding, no springs to soften the ride, and there was little or no ventilation. Yeah, you heard right. It mostly felt like spending the day inside a rattling wooden box, and every bump in the road could throw you off balance. For many, riding inside was actually more uncomfortable than walking alongside the wagon. On top of everything, the journey was far from smooth or easy. It was full of rough patches, deep mud, steep hills, and rocky ground, which made traveling tough for both people and the animals pulling the wagons. Riding inside the wagon over these bumps was not just uncomfortable. It could be dangerous as well. Wagons often tipped over, and if someone fell out or got caught underneath, they could get seriously hurt. Because of this, most people chose to walk alongside their wagons, even when their feet were sore and their shoes worn down. Most families choose to walk every single day for hundreds of miles. It wasn't because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. The heat, dust, and flies made the trip even tougher. In the summer, the sun was hot, and there was no shade for miles. Sweat mixed with dirt from the animals covered everyone in dirt. Bugs buzzed constantly around exposed skin, especially near rivers and water stops. By evening, most travelers were too tired to do much except eat a small meal, check their wagons, and sleep on the ground under the open sky.
Pioneers who journeyed on the Oregon Trail used wagons.
While in movies and novels, families are often shown peacefully riding inside their wagons. The reality of the Oregon Trail was very different. But to fully understand what life was really like on the trail, we need to take a closer look at what these wagons actually were and what they were built to do. Inside the wagons, more storage than seating. A wagon wasn't built to be a cozy home on wheels. It was more like a tough workhorse, built to be strong and practical, but far from comfortable. Its job was to carry heavy supplies across hundreds of miles of rough, bumpy ground. If you were hoping for soft seats or a smooth ride, you'd quickly learn that the real experience was nothing like that. On the Oregon Trail, the most common wagon was called the Prairie Schooner. It was lighter than the big Conestoga wagons used in the East and was built to travel long distances. Its wooden frame was narrow, and the wheels were tall and covered with iron to help move through mud, sand, and rough ruts. The canvas top stretched over the frame to protect supplies from sun, rain, and dust. But it didn't do much to keep out the cold at night or the heat during the day. Inside, the floor was just rough wooden planks with no springs or cushions, so every bump in the trail was felt sharply. Meanwhile, the heavier Conestoga wagons, with their wide, curved shapes and huge storage space, were rarely used for the full trip on the Oregon Trail. They worked better for shorter trips, like moving goods from a port to a nearby town. On the long journey west, every extra pound made the animals pulling the wagons work harder. That's why travelers preferred smaller, lighter wagons that could handle the months-long trip without wearing out the oxen or mules. Also, oxen were the real work animals on the trail, even though they weren't horses. They moved slowly and steadily but were much stronger and tougher than horses. They didn't usually get hurt easily on rough land. Mules were another option. They were quicker but could be stubborn and difficult to control. Horses, on the other hand, though often romanticized in stories, didn't have the strength to pull heavy wagons. The survival of the whole group often depended on these animals, which meant every choice about what to carry came down to one simple question. Would it help us reach the end of the trail, or would it just slow us down? Now, let's talk about what it was really like inside the wagon. Most people picture just a few crates, maybe a rolled-up bed and some space to sit. But the truth is, every inch was filled with supplies, like barrels of flour, cornmeal, and salt pork that sat next to sacks of beans, dried fruit, and coffee. Also, water barrels were often tied to the outside, but when they could, travelers stored extra water inside the wagon too. It didn't stop there. Tools like axes, saws, hammers, and shovels took up a lot of space. Spare parts for the wagon, like extra wheels, iron pieces for repairs, and even rawhide for quick fixes, were packed in too. Clothing and bedding were stuffed into sacks or wooden chests and wedged between heavier cargo to keep them from moving around. For those who brought animals, bags of feed might be squeezed inside as well, though most of the feed had to be found along the way. A family might save a small corner for personal things like a Bible, a sewing kit, a few books, or a photograph in a wooden frame. These were luxuries kept not because they were needed to survive, but because they held pieces of the life they had left behind. However, these items were few and light, and when a wagon broke an axle or an animal became tired or sick, tough choices had to be made. Heavy heirlooms or furniture were often left by the side of the trail, abandoned without any ceremony.
There were basically two types of wagons that pioneers used to travel the Oregon Trail on their journey west.
In all these, there was very little space to sit inside the wagon, and if someone rode inside, they usually had to sit on crates or sacks, squeezed in among the supplies. There was no backrest or cushion, and the wagon shook with every bump in the road. Since there were no shock absorbers, the rough ride went straight through the wooden frame. After hours of this, a person could feel bruised, sore, and dizzy. And because of this, most able-bodied adults chose to walk beside their wagons. This helped lighten the load on the animals and let them keep a steady pace without tiring too quickly. Children often walked too, although very young ones might ride for part of the day. The elderly, the sick, or those recovering from injuries were given space inside when needed. But even then, riding wasn't without risks. The constant shaking could make injuries worse, and the lack of fresh air inside the canvas-covered wagon made illness spread more quickly. The truth is, those wagons weren't cozy little homes like the movies or books make us think. Instead, they were built tough and light, just enough to carry everything a family needed to start over far from home. Every nail, board, and iron strap was chosen for practical reasons, not comfort. They called it the Oregon Trail, but the truth was far more unsettling. Why did anyone even embark on this journey in the first place? And what were they really chasing? Let's find out. The Oregon Trail, the real reason behind the journey. In the 18th century, things were changing fast in the United States. The East Coast was already filled with cities and farms, and the Mississippi River didn't feel like the edge of the world anymore. But out west was a whole different story, with wide open spaces filled with mountains, rivers, and forests stretching as far as the eye could see. Not many Americans lived there yet, but everyone knew there was a lot to benefit from there. That's where the Oregon Trail came in. It became the go-to route for people chasing a new start and big opportunities. The trail stretched more than 2,000 miles from Missouri to the fertile valleys of Oregon country. It crossed the wide Great Plains, climbed the Rocky Mountains, and passed through deserts and deep river valleys. It wasn't a single clear road, but a network of paths and crossings worn down by thousands of travelers before. At its heart, the trail was more than just a route on a map. It was also a place full of opportunity and danger. The people who embarked on this journey weren't just rugged mountain men or professional explorers. Most were farmers, tradesmen, and families hoping for a fresh start. They came from places like Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky, and other states east of the Missouri River. Some of these people sold their farms, packed up their belongings, and merged with neighbors to make the trip. Some had heard about Oregon's mild climate and rich soil through letters from earlier settlers. Others were drawn by newspaper stories that painted the region as a kind of paradise on Earth. Here's where things get really interesting. One of the major reasons people moved west was because of the Donation Land Claim Act, passed in 1850. It offered free land in the Oregon Territory to settlers willing to work on the land. For married couples, the offer was even bigger: 320 acres for each spouse, making 640 acres total if they made the journey and settled there. Back then, owning land meant security and respect. That promise was enough to convince thousands to take the chance and head west. But the opportunity to own land was not the only reason for moving. Many people were facing hard times with money, crowded towns, and little chance to improve their lives in the East. The trail offered a way out, a chance to start fresh and live life their own way. For many, it was not just about new land. It was also about leaving old problems behind. The Oregon Trail became a symbol of self-reliance and the hope that a better life waited just beyond the horizon. The journey was not an easy move, though. It took 4 to 6 months to travel the whole trail, and every mile came with its challenges. The weather was always a major challenge. Thunderstorms could turn open plains into flood zones in just a few hours. Early snow in the mountains could trap travelers before they reached their destination. The heat baked the ground hard and cracked, and cold winds could blow in without any warning. The challenges didn't stop with the weather. Rivers were another danger. Crossing them could be deadly, especially in the spring when the water was fast and deep. Wagons could tip over, oxen could be swept away, and sometimes whole families were lost during one crossing. The land itself was tough too, with steep hills to climb, rocky slopes to go down, and long stretches of rough, rutted dirt that shook the wagons and tested every step of the journey.
The fact that these people, who were the immigrants, went ahead and did it on their own.
Despite all these risks, the trail's pull stayed strong. Every season, new wagon trains gathered at starting points like Independence and St. Joseph in Missouri, waiting for the right time to leave. Timing was everything, too. If you left too early, there wouldn't be enough grass for the animals, and if you left too late, winter could block the mountain passes before the journey was over. In these busy towns, strangers came together and became traveling companions, promising to watch out for each other as they faced the long road ahead. The journey's success depended on more than just individual strength. It took teamwork. Travelers shared food, helped fix each other's wagons, and took turns standing guard at night. Oxen teams were traded or borrowed to keep the wagons moving. When danger struck, whether from bad weather, rough land, or illness, survival often came down to working together. Still, behind all that determination and teamwork, the truth was clear. Both people and animals were pushed to their limits. And while movies and stories show families riding comfortably inside, the truth is that most people had to walk. The animals needed rest. The wagons had to stay light, and travelers had to be ready for whatever the trail threw at them. The Oregon Trail was a challenge that tested patience, strength, and the ability to face sudden problems. Reaching Oregon required more than supplies and strong oxen. It took enduring long days of hard work and mental struggle on foot. However, the good news is that for those who made it, the reward was real. Fertile farmland, new communities, and the pride of doing what few could. But getting there meant knowing the journey was not a peaceful ride through open land. It was a tough trek where every step counted. The true strength behind the journey came as much from human endurance as from the dream of what awaited at the end. Why people rarely rode in wagons. There were many reasons why people rarely rode inside wagons on the Oregon Trail. However, one of the most important had to do with weight. The animals pulling those wagons could only carry so much before they got tired or even injured. Adding the extra weight of people inside made their job even harder. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about keeping those animals strong enough to last the whole journey. If the oxen slowed down, the entire group risked falling behind or running low on supplies. So even though walking was tough, most travelers chose it because it gave their animals the best chance of making it all the way. Keeping the animals strong wasn't only important, it was everything. Oxen were the real power behind the journey.
Traveling along the Oregon Trail was actually more complicated than it sounds. From the different types of wagons used to...
And if one got too weak or hurt, the wagon could come to a complete stop. Finding new oxen in the middle of the trail was nearly impossible. Losing an ox team often meant leaving the wagon and all its supplies behind. So every step travelers took on foot was actually helping to protect the animals. Walking wasn't just hard on the people, it was a way to give those oxen the best shot at pulling them to their new home. It didn't end there. There was also the danger of accidents. Riding in a wagon wasn't only uncomfortable, it could be downright risky. If a wheel hit a hidden rock or the wagon tilted too much on a slope, passengers could be thrown out. Now imagine falling hard onto the packed trail at speed. That's very dangerous, and in the chaos, there was a real chance of being run over by the heavy wheels or trampled by the animals. Even small injuries like a sprained ankle or broken arm could become serious problems, especially since medical help was limited to whatever skills and supplies the group had on hand. Another reason people preferred to walk was for visibility and control. The trail was unpredictable, with hazards that could appear in an instant. Loose ground near a riverbank, a hidden hole that could catch a wheel, or a sudden obstacle in the wagon's path could cause serious trouble. Walking alongside allowed travelers to watch for these dangers and tackle them quickly. They could guide the animals around obstacles, check the harnesses, and keep the wagons moving in a steady line. From inside the wagon, it was harder to see trouble coming until it was too late. Sometimes, the terrain itself made riding impossible. Steep hills meant travelers had to get out and walk alongside, sometimes even pushing from behind to help steady the animals. Crossing rivers was especially tricky. People had to lead the oxen on foot, feeling the water's depth and making sure the wheels didn't get stuck or swept away. In muddy areas, walking lightened the wagon's load, reducing the chance it would sink or get stuck. Rocky paths also often forced passengers to step aside and let the driver carefully guide the wagon through narrow or rough spots. So, because of all these challenges, riding in the wagon became a special privilege reserved for those who truly needed it. The sick, the injured, the elderly, or the very young. A child might be allowed to ride for part of the day, especially when the sun was blazing or the distance was long. But even then, most were expected to walk whenever they could. For many families, space inside the wagon was simply too precious to give up for seats. Supplies had to take priority, and often those supplies filled every inch of the wagon's interior. Walking the trail was not as easy as it seemed. Most travelers covered around 10 to 15 miles each day. Yeah, you heard right, depending on the weather and the condition of the road. They carried the heavy weight of exhaustion along with their own bodies. Blisters and swollen feet were common. Worn boots needed constant repair, and when shoes gave out, some wrapped cloth around their feet for protection. Summer brought risks like sunburn, heat exhaustion, and dehydration, while early mornings could bring frost that numbed fingers and toes even in spring. But the exhaustion wasn't only physical. For many, the endless routine, day after day of the same slow steps, the same changing but often dull landscape, and the constant cycle of breaking camp, walking, caring for animals, and setting up camp again, could wear down the spirit. Rest was scarce, and the mental fatigue sometimes ran as deep as the tired muscles. Still, most chose to keep walking, because even with all the pain and hardship, it was safer than riding. Staying safe mattered more than comfort on this long and uncertain journey. Here's the saddest part. Even when someone passed away, the wagon train usually kept moving. Illness, accidents, and exhaustion made death a difficult part of life on the trail. But stopping for long was not an option. Burials were done quickly, often marked by a simple pile of stones or a wooden sign by the side of the path. Sometimes wagons were even rolled over fresh graves to protect them from animals or others. The group had to continue, because staying too long could put everyone in danger. Looking back, it might seem like walking alongside the wagons was just a matter of tradition. However, the reality was far more practical and deeply human. Walking helped protect the animals from exhaustion, reduced the risk of accidents, slowed the spread of illness, and gave travelers better control over the slow and challenging journey. Despite all the hardships, walking was the safest way to travel those thousands of miles from start to finish. The real story of the Oregon Trail isn't about wagons or wild animals, but the silent and unseen strength that kept families moving forward against all odds. The unseen strength behind the journey, more than just a trail. Now, we've understood how tough the Oregon Trail was and why most people chose to walk instead of ride, and how every step on that dusty path came with its own risks and challenges. But beyond the rattling wagons and sore feet, there's a bigger story here. One about the silent, often invisible strength that carried families through this incredible journey. What is even more surprising is that people who embark on this journey are not experienced explorers or trained adventurers. They were regular people stepping into the unknown with hope and determination. What brought them together was not skill, but a strong dream of a better life, and the courage to risk everything for it. That hope and courage are the real strength that carried them down the road. Take, for example, two women who helped change how we see this journey. In 1836, two women named Narcissa Whitman and Eliza Spaulding were among the first white women to travel the Oregon Trail. At that time, most women stayed home while the men faced all the dangers. But these two decided to travel alongside the men, crossing wild rivers, climbing steep mountains, and dealing with sickness just like everyone else. Their bravery was remarkable, and because of them, many families realized the trail was not just for rugged men. It was a chance for entire families to start a new life. They carried with them a strong hope. Even though every mile was uncertain, they believed the West could become a new home. And then there's the story of the Donner Party, which serves as a powerful reminder of how harsh the Oregon Trail could be. In 1846, this group of pioneers decided to take a shortcut that turned out to be a deadly mistake. They got trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains during the winter, facing freezing temperatures and scarce food. Their story is often remembered because of the tragedy, but it also reveals something deeper about human strength.
There were many factors that led to the tragic end suffered by the Donner Party, and they may have been doomed from the start.
Even in the worst conditions, many of them fought hard to survive. The Donner Party's experience became a lesson for future travelers. It showed that timing was everything. Leaving too late in the season or making risky choices about the route could result in deadly consequences. Their story also reminds us that no matter how strong or hopeful people were, the trail demanded preparation and sometimes a bit of luck. It was a reminder and proof that the West was as dangerous as it was full of promise. However, for most travelers, The Oregon Trail was more than just surviving each day. It was about coming together and building a community on the move. As wagon trains grew, families and strangers alike formed strong bonds that often lasted long after the journey ended. People shared the little meals they had, cared for the sick, and learned the skills needed to get through difficult situations. Some blacksmiths fixed broken wheels, cooks prepared meals over open fires, and storytellers lifted everyone's spirits with stories of home and dreams of what lay ahead. This teamwork was not just helpful, but absolutely necessary for facing the long and uncertain miles still to come. Even the youngest travelers weren't left out. They had an important part to play. They helped gather wood, watched over the animals, and kept an eye out for any dangers. Growing up on the trail meant learning responsibility at a young age, adjusting to new challenges quickly, and realizing that everyone's efforts counted. The trail became a place where resilience was taught, offering lessons that went far beyond what you might learn in a regular classroom. It's also important to understand the mental strength needed for this journey. Walking 10 to 15 miles every day, facing hot sun, harsh weather, and the uncertainty ahead could easily wear down anyone's spirit. Yet letters and diaries from these travelers tell a different story. They reveal moments filled with joy, hope, and deep reflection. Many wrote about the breathtaking landscapes around them, the wide-open fields, towering mountains, and wild rivers. Despite all the dangers, these sights inspired a real sense of wonder. They held on to dreams of fertile land and fresh starts, passing these stories down to their children, who would one day settle far from where they began. One of the early travelers, Narcissa Whitman, shared how the bright mornings and clear streams along the trail lifted her spirits, even when the journey got difficult. Stories like hers remind us that the Oregon Trail was not just about struggle, but also about moments of beauty and hope. Another powerful example comes from James Reed, a leader who faced great hardship after being forced out of the Donner Party following a family dispute. Despite this setback, he pushed forward with incredible determination. His courage and leadership helped save many lives, showing how one person's strength could change the course of a journey. At the same time, the Native American tribes whose lands the trail crossed played an important but often overlooked role. Some tribes helped travelers by trading supplies, sharing their deep knowledge of the land, or guiding them safely through tough areas. These encounters were complicated and sometimes tense, but they also showed moments of cooperation and mutual support. The journey west was about more than just bravery and endurance. It was also about the coming together of different cultures in a shared struggle for survival. All of this reminds us of something we might forget in today's fast-moving world. The Oregon Trail was not just a path marked by wheels and oxen. It was a collective human effort. It was a story woven from countless acts of kindness, hardship, hope, and the strength found in community. So, when we look back, the wagons and dusty trails are just one part of the story. The real heart of the Oregon Trail lies with the people who, despite fear and hardship, kept moving forward because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Oregon City is where the Oregon Trail finally comes to an end, and it didn't take long for this spot to grow into a busy settlement. Today, anyone curious about the trail's story can visit the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center there, filled with fascinating exhibits. Just nearby is the Willamette Valley, known for its rich soil and endless fields. It's where many travelers decided to settle down back then, and over time, towns like Salem and Eugene popped up, growing straight out of those early farming days. As you follow the trail today, you will still see pieces of history such as wagon tracks carved deep into the ground, which are reminders of those long-ago journeys. Nearby, the Tamastlicht Cultural Institute honors the Native American tribes who lived along the trail by keeping their stories and culture alive. Although no one travels the trail anymore, the routes that travelers took did not disappear. They helped shape modern roads like Interstate 84 in Idaho. And it is clear that the Oregon Trail's mark is still part of the land around us. What do you think about the courage of the people who traveled the Oregon Trail? Do you believe their story can help us understand strength and the power of working together? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.